Hey guys, it's Pineapple, and it's finally time to talk about a character that I've been wanting to discuss on this channel for a while, but haven't had much opportunity to since I started my channel around season 3. We're going to talk about My Hero Academia's fictional hero killer, Stain, and what exactly his relevance in the story is if I've somehow managed to figure things out. You see, I've been dying to do this video because every time I hint towards the idea or even talk about Stain on Twitter, you'll see that a lot of people actually think that Stain is dead. This is because the anime actually cut out the scene where we saw him alive and well within Tartarus Prison, and while his lung was pierced, causing him to pass out at the end of his arc, the doctors at Tartarus are known to be especially talented because according to the Ultra Analysis databook, they even managed to do surgery on Overhaul's arms, while apparently his quirk evolved to work in an entirely different way. You can check out the video where we discuss that by clicking here. So of course we're going to talk about Stain and probably Overhaul in this really action-packed video, so I'm going to need you guys to sit back and get ready for some madness. I want to remind you guys you can follow me on Twitter at VocalPineapple to keep up with my wild adventures on there, or subscribe, hit that bell icon, and click notify to keep up with me on YouTube. For anyone that's been wanting some new merch, check out my Teespring shop for new Deku gear as well as pineapple stickers and more, and I've got some new badges for members coming soon. So that means now's a good time to click join if you're interested in getting those. With all of that out of the way, let's get to talking about why I think Stain would try to protect All Might if My Hero Academia actually had a prison break arc. Hit it! So what are we talking about here, and why is Stain back in the picture on this channel? Well, I've been trying to think about the storylines of characters that we haven't seen recently, and there's one that stands out that I don't think is anywhere near finished. I'm talking, of course, about the hero killer, Stain. Now, Stain is of course a villain early on in the series who left a big impression on the fandom and of course on the characters inside the world of My Hero Academia, and this incident went on to inspire other villains to start moving in Japan. He became a viral hit overnight, with characters that aren't even villains thinking that he was at least cool. At the end of his arc, he's defeated by Deku, Shoto, and Ida, and ultimately ends up making a scene before he passes out and is rushed for surgery at Tartarus Prison for a collapsed lung. Ever since then, Stain has been sitting in Tartarus Prison, and a lot has happened. In fact, most of the story has happened ever since Stain was in there. But we do get reminders about his presence in the story in the form of All Might's reminders about his meaning of Stain being postponed over and over, and also Dabi mentioning Stain here and there like he did recently in his fight against Hawks. Hori wants us to remember that Stain is alive, he wants us to remember that Stain is in Tartarus, and he wants us to remember that Stain's ideology is out there being used by people like Dabi to reach their goals. But why is this? Why is Stain important or relevant at all? Over time, we've seen that all the arcs in My Hero Academia are placed where they are for a purpose. So why is Stain important so early on in the series, and why is he relevant now at all? I personally don't think that Horikoshi just using Stain and throwing him away would be in his style or would be a good thing to do, since Stain was a really beloved and amazing character. So is there a way that Hori can use Stain to further the plot while also developing the character and giving him growth at the same time? Stain started off as a normal person who eventually succumbed to his own twisted ideals and then was driven further after an encounter with Knuckle Duster in My Hero Academia Vigilantes. You can hear all about that story on my homie Dan's channel by clicking on the little card in the top right corner. Stain seems to still have some purpose in the plot, and with All Might being reminded that his meeting of Stain was being postponed again right before this war arc started, it seems like that meeting might be where Stain's character arc continues, or maybe even concludes. You see, All Might and Stain's meeting has been set up for a long time, and originally I thought that's where All Might was during this war arc, but it turns out that he's at UA watching Eri as all the craziness against Shigaraki is going on. I still think we're gonna see the meeting between All Might and Stain happen, so I'm thinking that All Might still hasn't had that meeting, and we're likely to see All Might heading to Tartarus at some point to have this conversation in the future. But what's the actual point of him doing that? Why would it be important for us to see that at all? Well, on All Might's side, I could see him wanting to wrap up loose ends as the time that Night Eye predicted for him to go approaches. He started doing this by giving Deku a book on the previous users and their quirks that he could study even when All Might is gone, and I think that All might see Stain as another one of these loose ends. Stain was a hero with a very public and obsessive fixation on All Might. He took out heroes who he felt weren't meant to be heroes because when it comes down to it, they weren't as virtuous or perfect as All Might. They didn't embody what it meant to be a hero like he did, so they were fakes. Well, if All Might were to visit Stain, How would Stain feel once he saw All Might's true form, unable to even fill out his costume? We've seen that All Might wears his costume to Tartarus when he goes there on hero duty for a meeting, and I think Small Might in the huge All Might costume would really send a message to Stain. In fact, I think that's part of the reason that All Might would have agreed to see Stain in the first place, to try and set him straight. I could see All Might arriving to Tartarus Prison and sitting right in front of Stain as they talk through the glass. All Might would absolutely give Stain some wise lines, but I think the core of their discussion would be about how All Might was never meant to be a gold standard. Stain's vision of All Might as a hero that everyone had to live up to pass his test was flawed, because in reality the vision of All Might that Stain believed in was a fake. The iconic hero that is All Might is sort of like a puppet, and Toshinori Yagi is the puppeteer, keeping the puppet alive with all of his strength and will to defend Japan from the worst of the worst. And now that All Might literally can't fill his own shoes, I think it'd be possible for All Might to get Stain to understand that his way of thinking was wrong the moment that he thought he could become the judge, because he himself couldn't even judge the difference between the fool's gold that he was passing off as the real gold standard. Stain went wrong by trying to make everyone live up to a standard that he judged, when the standards he was judging them on were partially based on a lie. Now, I don't think that this would just automatically make Stain a good guy or anything, but I do think that this conversation would do a lot to calm Stain down and make him a lot less prone to attack or kill a hero or vigilante that he sees on the streets if he somehow got out of prison. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because is there even a chance for Stain to get out of prison? Well, as we've mentioned, Stain is in Tartarus Prison, the location that a lot of the fandom has been speculating will be the center of an amazing prison break one day. Well, if All Might does go to meet Stain, then Hori is placing All Might and All for One in the same place, while Shigaraki is out there somewhere in Japan with the power to raid Tartarus at any time. Now, the question that I've also raised in my Death of All Might theory video is how amazing would it be if Shigaraki raided Tartarus to free All for One on the same day that All Might was scheduled to meet Stain? While Shigaraki has definitely denied All for One's will, I think that there are two ways to look at why he'd go to Tartarus Prison to see All for One. First, if you believe that Shigaraki is still allied of All for One, he could go there to destroy Tartarus Prison, freeing All for One and letting the villains there loose, allowing most of them to join the Metal Liberation Army to make up for the numbers that he lost during the war. But what if Shigaraki goes there for another reason? What if Shigaraki isn't still allied with All for One, and like I've mentioned in a previous theory, he goes there to get rid of All for One and absorb the rest of his quirks and the copy of All for One still inside of him? That kind of goes into my weird idea that Shigaraki's only 75% complete when he came out of the pod, and maybe wiping All for One away and stealing all of his quirks would give Shigaraki some sort of 25% that he needs to be whole without any drawbacks. Regardless of that, both of those branching paths involve Shigaraki attacking the prison while All Might is talking to Stain. So what exactly happens there on a moment-to-moment level? Well, if Tartarus Prison starts to get invaded by Shigaraki and the Metal Liberation Army, you could imagine that they'd open up the prison cells to allow the prisoners that are inside to escape and fight the probably powerful Tartarus prison guards. This, of course, would make it easier for Shigaraki and the others to get to All for One. Now, the big tension building aspect here is that All Might would be in the middle of a prison made for the deadliest and most dangerous villains, most of which he probably put in here during his time as a hero, during a breakout. As soon as a villain spots All Might, I think they and every other villain around would start targeting him so they could be known as the one who killed All Might. If you think about it from a villain's perspective, that title, even if it happened after All Might was already weakened, comes with a lot of clout and a lot of power. So you could see how All Might could be in a lot of danger, but like the title of this video suggests, I think there's someone there who might actually be on All Might's side. Like we've been saying, Stain sees All Might as the gold standard of what a hero is. And even though I think All Might is going to show Stain that even he isn't what Stain wants others to live up to, I think Stain would think All Might is still pretty amazing for everything that he did, and he would want to protect All Might's life against other villains. In fact, I think Stain would grab a pencil or maybe a pen off of All Might and stand in front of him with the same horrifying and body paralyzing aura that he used right before he collapsed at the end of his arc. I definitely think I could see Horikoshi doing something like having Stain warn all the other villains in the room that the only person worthy of killing All Might is Stain before he dives into the crowd and starts picking them apart. What's interesting about the situation is that we know quite a few of the villains in Tartarus, so Stain going up against some of the ones that we know are in there, or even teaming up with others, sounds like the making of a really amazing arc. Imagine Stain running into a room where Overhaul's fusing with someone so he can use their arms to heal himself back to normal, and having to deal with that before All For One himself eventually breaks out of his cell and starts hunting All Might down throughout the prison as he flies around through the hallways laughing, stealing every quirk that he thinks would get him to All Might quicker. This theory really has me questioning whether or not Stain could use his quirk to freeze All For One in place and maybe actually hurt him or take him out, or at least hold him off so he doesn't just take out All Might. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. To me, it just sounds awesome to think that Stain could be in the position to defend All Might against other villains, and while I don't think that Stain is anywhere near powerful enough for it, it'd be even cooler to see him have a face-to-face moment with Shigaraki again, since Shigaraki has changed so much since their last meeting. I'm conflicting on wanting Stain to fight Shigaraki so he could let All Might escape from the prison while Stain dies to Shigaraki in the process, or a much funner path that I think could keep Stain in the story for far longer. There are two characters that I've had my eye on in My Hero Academia because it feels like their stories could come together in a really natural and fluid way. One, of course, is Stain, but the other is actually the gentle criminal, Gentle. You see, these two characters couldn't be more different in a lot of ways, but their stories aren't as different as you think, and the differences that are there actually make me think that these two would make a great team once they stop hating each other, which I'm sure they absolutely would at first. Stain and Gentle are both villains that have gone viral in the My Hero Academia universe. Both have had run-ins with a sparky green-haired kid from UA who both of them deem to be a true hero, and both of them have backstories about wanting to do good at first, but turning to the villain side afterwards. We've seen that Gentle is hinted to be on the road of redemption if the last conversation that he had on screen was anything to go by. And if Stain survives his meeting of All Might, I think he definitely would be too, but for a different kind of redemption. You see, these are two characters that I think would be good partners because their strengths and their weaknesses benefit each other, and so do their actual identities in the narrative. Stain is a character who judges whether or not somebody is a true hero. Gentle is a character who we've seen wanted nothing more to be a hero despite how things turned out. Gentle wanted to be remembered. He wanted to be spectacular because he wasn't allowed to be what he wanted to be. But through Stain, Gentle could actually prove himself as a proper hero. I know Stain isn't exactly the end-all be-all for who and who isn't a hero, but having Gentle be one of the few people that Stain deems a true hero would at least make him a true hero in my eyes, let alone the eyes of many in the fandom. I think these two being put in some sort of team together also gives us the possibility that Stain and Gentle can do some sort of mission together, and Gentle can actually go massively viral, basically piggybacking off of Stain's popularity. It's kind of like Gentle is doing a big YouTube collab with Stain. It's really funny to think about it that way. Besides that, though, I think their fighting styles are really complementary. Stain fights really well in alleyways, and it's probably really difficult to fight him in a forest where he can jump between the trees that are all around his enemy. Well, that means that Stain probably isn't too great at fighting in wide open spaces because his movement is going to be somewhat limited. However, if he was teamed up with Gentle as part of some villain reformation program, Gentle could completely solve that problem. With his elastic air pads and Stain's sharp eye, Gentle could create footholds for Stain all over the battlefield that Stain could then bounce off of and pick up massive speed for his attacks. Now, if you think it might be too dangerous to have Stain out there as part of some kind of state-sanctioned program, don't forget that the government's already done worse by making heroes who always do what they're told even if it means spilling the blood of a good person the picture of what it truly means to be a hero in this society. If they've done that, I don't think it's too far for them to create a program where villains who might be useful in certain situations can be trained as dogs of the state. Now, if you're worried about Stain ending people left and right, don't forget also that Gentle can make anything besides a person elastic. So if Stain ever posed a risk to hurting someone or going off the edge, Gentle could potentially make Stain's weapons useless by making them elastic or putting barriers between him and his target to minimize Stain's potential damage. This is a really good way to keep Stain from accidentally going too far, and also to make this pairing all the more reasonable. It kind of reminds me of the immortal duo from Naruto, because Hidan and Kakazu both kept each other in check. Gentle can't kill Stain because, I mean, he just can't, and Gentle can probably make it very difficult for Stain to kill him if he says something to get on Stain's nerves by making his knives elastic or using invisible air pads to keep Stain away as much as possible. If anything, I'd say Gentle is one of the few people who probably should be paired with Stain if Stain were to ever need a partner for some sort of official mission. And with Dabi out there twisting and misusing Stain's ideology, maybe Stain has to be the one to go to Dabi personally and get him to stop using his his name in vain after All Might potentially help Stain have a change of heart. All of this is possible and none of this is possible, but those are just a few ways that things can go depending on how Horikoshi wants to handle Stain and All Might's meeting. We could just get a very quick meeting between the two that doesn't really end up serving much importance, or we could get some very meaningful chaos and content that branches off into future arcs, or what's most likely is that we'll end up being somewhere in between. Let me know if you could see any of this coming true and what you think would happen once All Might and Stain have their meeting. Could Stain really defend All Might long enough to escape together and become part of some villain reformation program, or would he risk his life to try and save All Might by attacking Shigaraki and All for One, ultimately giving his life there to defend All Might, which would be a really just enjoyable flip. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is Pineapple. I love you. Peace.